It has connective difficulties caused by a biochemical imbalance causing emotional autism. Certain reactions...
Wait a second. It has memories. Why does it have memories?
Roll over, play dead, heal. You can't teach it tricks.
Why not? We're teaching you.
The fall 1997 box office had been pretty calm. Since September of 1997, only 7 movies made over $50 million domestically, despite a lot of interesting films out there. Not one film made over $100 million domestically, and the only one that got close enough was I Know What You Did Last Summer, with $72 million. With this in mind, Fox thought Alien Resurrection would be the shoe-in because horror and science fiction were in that successful group. Surely this popular franchise could beat I Know What You Did Last Summer. The week before Alien Resurrection's release was another good sign for the science fiction film because nothing was a breakout blockbuster. The only real money draw were dramas and the kid-focused Anastasia. And since Starship Troopers was calming down revenue-wise, there was little competition for Alien Resurrection. To hype up the film, there was the standard soundtrack and novel released. But there was also a Making of Alien Resurrection novel and a lame postcard book with 30 images from the film that offered little besides pictures for a price tag. There was an Aliens Predator collectible card game by Hyperprism, and the game was designed to have 3 players who can be either aliens, predators, or marines competing to be the last standing. There were 6 Alien Resurrection figures from Kenner, but the human sculpts were extremely bow-legged, making them ugly and unposable. The alien figures were nice though, and I actually picked this one up in 1998 when it was on clearance to display in my office. A 12-inch Warrior drone was released, and there were also 2 alien tube toys as well. Despite this, the merchandise didn't shake up the market, especially the Kenner figures, which would sit on shelves for over a year. Though Alien Resurrection opened early in France on November 12, 1997, the United States got its first look at Alien 4 on November 26, 1997. Though it had a strong opening of $20.2 million the first week, everyone was shocked that it took second place to Flubber, which came out the same day as Alien Resurrection. Fox's hope for the franchise was quickly dashed when they learned the film opened second place. The film dropped over 50% the following week, making only $8.6 million, but managed to maintain second place thanks to only one new film, Good Will Hunting, being released on 12/5/1997. On its third week, the movie dropped another 48%, making $4.4 million, but this drop was a gut punch because it showed Alien didn't have legs or impact to wide audiences. The main reason for this was that horror fans unanimously chose Scream 2 over Alien, and the opening for Scream was a whopping $41.1 million on its first week of release, more than what Alien Resurrection made in its first 3 weeks. There were other releases on the third week that sucked away more ticket sales, like Amistad, For Richer For Poorer, and even Home Alone 3, if you can believe that. The final nail in the coffin for Alien Resurrection was on December 19, 1997, when Titanic and Tomorrow Never Dies entered the arena. Theaters would throw out Alien Resurrection to make more screens available for Titanic, which was selling like gangbusters. In some places, Titanic would be on 3 screens, while Tomorrow Never Dies had 2. Scream 2, Flubber, and Good Will Hunting continued strong. thus quashing Alien out of almost all 8-screen theaters. In the end, the film was very disappointing in the States. The only saving grace for Alien Resurrection was the overseas market, where the film made a healthy $113.5 million, giving it a final tally of $161.3 million. The only merchandise that did not make it in time for the film's launch was an Alien Resurrection game, but there were issues and the game was scrapped and redesigned as a first-person shooter that came out in the year 2000 instead. Some of the actors returned to voice their characters in the game, like DiStefano, Christie, and Father. A lot of critics and fans bashed the movie, especially Siskel and Ebert, who voted it as one of the worst movies of the year. Now, up front, we will cover both cuts of the film. It should be noted that the special edition is not the director's cut, as the theatrical cut is Genet's preferred version. And I agree with his sentiments, mainly because of the opening shots in the special edition. This scene is just terrible, and I usually skip it when watching the special edition of the film. It's my belief that the scene totally undermines the seriousness required for a film like Alien, and it turns the frightening maw of the creature into a punchline. What's worse is the scene undermines the Auriga military crew's agency from the get-go. The military in this film are pretty much depicted as morons, and this was done on purpose. So our introduction to the said military is a dumb soldier slurping on his straw like a bored toddler who smashes a bug with his bare finger and then stupidly tries to flick it off. You can just hear the director saying, "Act dumber, be dumber, look like an infant." He then puts this bug at the end of the straw and puts his mouth right where he put the bug, and don't tell me he didn't get some of it in his mouth when he spit the thing at the audience. This is a mockery of tone, and the word embarrassing comes to mind. This also shows the ignorance of the filmmakers where military procedures are concerned, because anyone who knows anything about guard duty will tell you that when you leave a post, it needs to be spick and span before your relief arrives. Therefore, making his window dirty with bug guts would only mean he has to clean it, or he would be dressed down for leaving it for someone else to clean up. It is complete farce and is unfortunately the premise of future problems that will pepper this film going forward. Despite my annoyance with this scene, I always try to be fair and thorough, so in defense of this scene, it is a minute attempt at world building. In the novel, it makes it clear that the bug is a result of many cloning experiments with the xenomorphs on the ship. Though not often seen, the soldier kills this bug out of boredom, and the book notes it was the high point of his shift. Even though I'm trying to be fair here, this just annoys me more because the bug is supposedly a result of xenomorph cloning experiments. If this is the case, wouldn't the bug's blood have at least slight acidic properties? And therefore the soldier now has irritated his finger and lip, and yet there is no evidence of this in the scene. Everything about this sequence is juvenile and pointless. Cut this out of my Alien film, please, and give me the theatrical cut. As for the theatrical cut beginning, it's a little gross, but it's more appropriate for the tone of the film. The year is 2381, according to the film. Right from the start, the color of the film is off thanks to the ENR process, which adds silver to the film during processing to give it a darker tint. This was cinematographer Darius Kanji's contribution, and my only question here is why? Why not just make a visually appealing alien film like all the rest without trying to manipulate colors? This isn't Seven or just another mid-90s movie trying to achieve that look. An alien film should be above gimmicky things like that and remain timeless without changing the entire color process. In defense of Darius Kanji's style, he was achieving the exact dream-like quality his director Jean-Pierre wanted, which he requested as he wanted this film to be analogous to a children's dark story. Thus, the colors represent a dreamlike state. It shifts the colors and deepens the blacks to bring us to another world where reality and surreality meet. It increases the sharpness to a point of hyper-reality. Now, if you notice the two guards by the clone, they are both chewing their gum in unison. It's a blink and you miss it detail. On the DVD commentary, it is clearly stated that Jean-Pierre put this in the film to poke fun at Americans.
Pitoff, is that making fun of Americans, the way those two soldiers are chewing gum?
Yeah, sort of. It's very Genet.
We are less than a few minutes into the film, and once you realize these gags, it completely upsets the serious tone that an alien film should possess. Moving on. The child clone was based off of pictures of Sigourney in her youth. Speaking of the cloning process, I can't say if this is believable or not since I am not a DNA expert. As a fictional concept, I find it fascinating and a Pandora's box of storytelling possibilities. In fact, I would argue that this premise alone is one of the most interesting elements of the film for me. The film proposes that Dr. Clemens took blood from Ripley and put it on ice at Fury in Alien 3. This blood was discovered and utilized for this project. For 10 years, the scientists tried to separate the DNA from Ripley and the alien. 2 of those 10 years have been on board the USM Auriga, and they have had 8 different full clone attempts to separate the xenomorph and human constructs since they got on the ship. Ripley 8 is the culmination of all this research. The novel states that the alien DNA actually combines with its host's blood during impregnation to help facilitate the growth and nutrients of the creature. In the end, separating alien from human DNA is completely impossible. Thus, Ripley is very alien and very human. Also, the aliens have human traits, which you will see, but the scientists got as close as they could. That's the premise, anyway, based on the material of the film. Now, I should note that there are valid questions I have heard from other YouTube channels that argue the chestburster would have burst from the clone long before Ripley matured into what we see in the film. It is a fair argument, and I can't argue or validate that view because there is no material stating how long it took for this specific clone to mature, or if measures were used to somehow suppress the alien growth. In the end, I can suspend disbelief even though questions remain about this. Dr. Mason Wren is in charge of the 7 scientists working on the Xenomorph project, and his character is an obvious Weyland-Yutani type villain. He has no morality, and this shows because he allows innocent people to be conscious when face-hugged, nor does he sedate the victims when impregnated to have them avoid pain. He also thinks he is better than everyone around him and is very condescending in the way he talks to others. By the end of the movie, he doesn't give a damn about Earth and wants to continue his research despite the reality of the situation. Wren doesn't really stack up to Golic or Ash or Burke, but he is effective as a character, and I never had any problems with him. Truth be told, it is the delivery of J.E. Freeman that makes this character work. Now, the most interesting scientist of the group, I think, is Gediman, played by Brad Dourif. Jonathan Gediman is a very sympathetic character at the start of the film, as he is a scientist who has a very parental bond with his subjects. He literally begs Wren to keep Ripley alive and shows that he is grateful when he is given that permission.
What about her? Can we keep her alive?
Sew her back up.
When eating with Ripley, he sincerely has a dialogue with her and is straightforward. When Wren later antagonizes her, he looks cautiously at Ripley like a concerned parent, knowing that Wren is attempting to belittle her. The biggest problem with this character is what happens later. He is the first to be taken to the hive, and yet is still alive after all the others were chestburster fodder. Now, I will say that Gediman is very fleshed out in the novel, and to be honest, if there is any Alien novelization that really enhances the first 4 films, Alien Resurrection really adds a lot of context and layers to the movie. So if you're a fan, You should check it out. It is a good book. A magnificent concept for the film is that Ripley is both alien and human, and it made for great storytelling. I really love this concept, and she is obviously very dangerous when she breaks Dr. Dan Sprague's arm as she is in surgery. She doesn't even notice the pain of having a gash in her chest. She just reacts. Visually, Weaver looks different, with black fingernails and her movements conveying less humanity and more alien. One thing to notice about Ripley throughout the entire film is that she is often sweaty or wet-looking. This was on purpose, and in these test shots, you can see they intended for her to constantly have a slimy look, like the aliens depicted in the movie. So like the creature's blood, her skin shares the same traits as the monsters by excreting goo. Yuck. Another interesting fact about Ripley 8 is that she did grow 4 alien dorsal tubes on her back while she was growing as a clone. Storyboards support this, and in costume design, there were applications put on Sigourney's skin for her awakening sequence, but the camera did not focus on that area. The only shot that shows one of the scars is this one, and you have to zoom in on it to make it out. These dorsal tubes were removed by Wren as she grew, according to the novel. In the novel, when Ripley wakes up, she tries to bite her fingernails, but they are somewhat impervious. This is where the mosquito scene occurs, but it was cut due to cost. And to think, someone chose to pursue the opening scene and film that over this scene. I guess satire was more important than tone. What makes Ripley dynamic for this film is when you take into the account the previous experiences she has gone through in the last 3 films. She was awake for a few days and her entire crew of the Nostromo was killed. Then she wakes up to find everything she knew is gone in aliens. She is then chastised and put in a no-win situation, and then goes with the Marines to see them all die, as well as the colony, and then she has to lose Newt and Hicks before witnessing everyone around her die before taking her own life. Then she wakes up to these fools ruining everything she worked for, and everything she did was pointless. It's no wonder she's grinning when the aliens get loose. It's really a great premise, and it's the saving grace of this film. Ripley starts the film out violent, instinctually hurting Dr. Sprague, and then chokes Wren for being in her face. Then she has to have armed guards and cuffed when being schooled. The only person she doesn't seem hostile towards is Gediman, and this can be explained by his parental and caring approach towards her. However, Ripley is not outwardly violent the moment she sees the picture of the little girl during the testing period. Something rattles her with that picture, and it is that distant memory of a girl with blonde hair, and the conflict inside her begins. Sigourney does a great job displaying this in her performance. The breath access panels was Jean-Pierre's brainchild, and it is art and satire over logic. It is suggested in the novel that such a thing exists to detect any substance abuse by soldiers to keep them from sensitive areas if under the influence. Apparently, this is an issue with the United Systems military. Although I can suspend disbelief for said concept, it really is a dumb premise, especially considering if a soldier was sick and how easily it would spread sickness among an isolated population in a confined environment such as a ship, especially when they are on a ship where DNA experiments are happening and who knows what kind of outbreaks could occur as a result. The idea of this pad is ridiculous in this situation. I'm sure there is some self-cleaning explanation for these devices in a tech manual out there, but the idea of breathing, thus spreading spittle on a console and then typing on a pad next to it is really not believable. It's an artsy-fartsy concept, best used in a B-movie. General Martin Perez is supposedly by the book, and the novel claims he endorses the alien experiments because he believes having a controlled army of aliens will save human lives and relegate the armed forces to mop up operations, thus putting humans, who are on Perez's side, in less peril. When Wren asks for the cargo, you can see Gediman doesn't know what they're talking about, and Perez shows his annoyance with Wren's breach of security in front of his subordinate. I really love Dan Hedaya, but even in Commando, I never took him seriously as a baddie, and I just can't buy him in an alien film. He is great in comedy, and with this in mind, I understand why he was cast, but the casting seems off to me. Still, it's not enough for me to hate the choice they picked. One of the things I found interesting about this character in the film is what the novel reveals later. When Elgin goes fishing for information about Perez's mission outside regulated space, Perez is considering killing the crew so there are no loose ends. Having the crew stay on the ship for a short while gives Perez more time to contemplate dispatching the crew. Now, the crew of the Betty is noted by all sources to have been together for a very long time as mercenaries or smugglers, excluding Call. So let's take a look at the crew. The first is Elgin, played by Michael Wincott, best known for his voice and presence in films like Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves, The Three Musketeers, and The Crow. When we first meet him, he is sarcastic and crude by giving his authorization code.
Hey son, I'll give you my authorization code. It's EATME.
I'm sorry, sir. Can you repeat that?
Once again, here's another funny jab at the Ariga military being totally incompetent, as the soldier does not even register he is being patronized. Sabra Hillard is honestly a walking corpse waiting to be caught by aliens. Of the crew, she is the most caring towards others and is the ship's capable pilot. But when push comes to shove, she's a mess after the aliens arrive and doesn't bring much to the table dealing with the aliens. No matter how much you like the crew of the Betty, it is evident that this bunch of mercenaries are just terrible people, with the exception of the ship's two gear monkeys, Vries and Call. Still, they don't have clean hands either. The crew shows little care kidnapping civilians and selling them like slaves. So, for those that think Alien 3 is morbid in its cast, well, this crew is now your heroes. Let that sink in. Gary Christie was played by Gary Dourdan, and the funny thing about this character is that both Christie and Joner are very close, and Joner allowed Christie to lead him. This is what Dourdan said about his character. Christie and Vries had a long history of fighting different wars together, and Joner and Vries kind of rub each other wrong, but they're still all buddies. We worked up their backgrounds, figured out how they all knew each other, the battles they'd fought. Ron and I particularly talked a lot about the rapport between Harry Dean Stanton and Yaphet Kotto in the first one. You really believe their relationship, and we thought that was important to establish with this group. Annalee Call, played by Winona Ryder, is a fine character, and I don't have complaints about her. At some point, she learned the cloning program. This is specified in the film, but upsets the timeline a little, because the cloning process took years to succeed, and would the Betty really be listed as smugglers to use for nabbing civilian subjects when they don't even know if the cloning process could succeed? A well-known Easter egg is that Call follows the alphabet list for androids. Ash was the first with A, Bishop was second with B, and now Call is C, to be followed by David in Prometheus and Covenant. Dom Vries is my favorite character of the Betty crew, and he is played by Dominic Pinon. A really interesting tidbit about this character is that Vries' chair actually weighed 700 pounds on set. According to outside canon, he lost the ability to walk during a mission on a moon called Cowlang after he was hit by shrapnel, and Christie carried him out of the danger zone. Now, a very hard thing to notice is that when the Betty docks, there's actually security guarding those docks. If you look real close, you will see guards moving around to the right and left of the ship. It's one of those things easily missed. Now, the military personnel of the ship are useless and not a very good representation of soldiers. As noted, we started out with a child sucking on a straw and being juvenile, then had two chewing gum in unison. Now we have one showing slight intimidation as he confronts Joner.
Could you hands up, please, sir?
What?
Could you get your hands up, please?
That's a pretty timid sentry. especially after Jonah was cheeky to him. These USM grunts are really a joke. As we noted earlier, in the film commentary, Genet was poking fun at American exceptionalism, and no doubt the soldiers are a comedic representation of how he saw the American military, and it landed flat for me. Later we get more examples of soldier incompetence, but for now let's keep moving. Now the cube of alcohol is another dumb sight gag for a lesser film. Not only would this cube take up more space to store, but twice as much liquid could be held in the same size package. It makes zero sense for this to exist. And why was this made? Well, here is an exact quote from the film commentary.
I think it's one of my favorites because it's very fucking stupid. But anyway, the effect is funnier.
Yeah.
During the meeting between Perez and Elgin, Hidea can be noticed sucking lemons. Hidea thought his character would constantly do this throughout the film, but after a few hours filming this scene, he got sick and abandoned the idea. The exact number of cryotubes delivered has always been debated, and I don't have an answer to solve this issue. Older scripts say 30 cryotubes. The book states 20, and in the film, Wren will later spout out that there are 12 aliens, which really doesn't make sense, seeing how he has no idea how many aliens were killed in gunfire that he heard before he said it. So whatever an individual's headcanon is, I am behind you 100%. Carolyn Williamson seems to have the only real morality among the doctors, as she is disturbed by the face-hugging process, and the novel stated she was physically sick by it. However, she shows herself a bit of a prude because she patronizes Ripley 8 with condescending corrections of her recognition skills in earlier scenes. There is a blink and you'll miss it moment when the first escape pod is ejected. You can see Dr. Williamson in it as she fled the moment the creatures got free.
Something of a predator, isn't she?
This line was put in the film as a direct nod to the Predator franchise. When we see a side shot of the Auriga, we can notice its distinct design, as some of its features have an alien-like anatomical design, most notably the alien rib area. This is what the ship designer had to say about it. The Auriga featured rib-like segments that extended or retracted, and its model equivalent performed these functions. But there was never a scene in the film where we needed to show these things actuate, so they were either open, half open, or closed. During the nightlife scenes, when we see Call, Jonah, and Christy, they are watching a show that is another mocking commentary of Americans and their love of guns. If you look at the vid closely, you can read that if you buy the gun, you will feel like a real gunslinger. Though it's small, this is where we see some friendship between Jonah and Christy. Genet doesn't really allow the film to slow down so we can soak in any of the characters, so you have to lean on the actors to give hints. Earlier, when the team confronted Ripley, in the background, you can see Christy tossing a ball with Hillard to amuse themselves while Ripley is annoyed. However, the moment Jonah is hit, Christy is quick to defend his friend. At the end of the fight, you see Jonah going out of his way to help Christy up, and one thing Jonah is not is attentive to others, except Christy. Like I said, you have to look for these details, and it's the actors' sincere attempts to convey this to get a sense of their relationship. Now, one might ask, how are the aliens all adults within a day at most? We know it's under a day because the Betty arrives, delivers the cargo, and then the victims are face-hugged. Then we cut to the basketball scene, and Elgin must not have had a chance to talk to the crew about staying out of trouble, because the first thing they do is get into trouble. Then there are the nightlife scenes, where Gediman inspects the adult creatures. So this has all happened on the same day. In the first Alien, the creature was impregnated and came to maturity somewhere around 2 days, and I went over that timeline in detail with my Alien video. The life cycle of the creature is much shorter in this film. There is an attempt to explain this in earlier scripts, where Wren states their growth is quicker because of the accelerated cloning process. and the book states the same. So I have no problem accepting the premise in any way. The logic can cause me to suspend my disbelief, unlike the ridiculous Alien Covenant or Alien vs. Predator. As Gediman inspects the creatures, the novel notes that the beast can sense heat, vibration, sound, scent, and movement, and possesses a 360-degree sense of awareness. The alien that confronts Gediman behind the glass is actually given characterization in the novel as it reads from the creature's point of view. It's an angry, vindictive thing, and it comes across almost human-like, and we will go into these apparent alien-human traits during the alien escape, which we will cover in our Part 4 coverage. What I will reveal now is that the novel states the creature can read some, and it has some of Ripley's human memories thanks to the cloning process. The creature wants to make Gediman suffer after he disciplines it. It basically wants revenge for being slighted, and it has very human motivations because while his fellow brood secure the ship, this alien waits specifically for Gediman so it can nab him. There are a lot of interesting things to note about these creatures during the film, so stay tuned for next week's episode. Before we go to call heading to Ripley, I want you to notice Gediman's eyes, specifically the left one. He is very enthusiastic to engage with his life's work and overjoyed like a father, but once the creature tries to harm him, he disciplines it. In one of the shots, there is clearly a tear under his eye. I always thought this was on purpose, as makeup and continuity should catch such things. So the question is the tear because the alien tried to get at him? Or is it because he has to discipline one of his creations? This is something you will have to decide. Call's microspray capsules are just as dumb as the breathing panels. Where did she get Perez's spit from, and why would this android not remember specifically which capsules are which with a photographic memory? Are they not labeled in some way to prevent using the wrong one to guarantee an alarm would not go off? Yeah, anyways, moving on. As we wrap up this video, I realize that it might sound like I'm bashing this film, but I don't feel that way at all. I don't hate this movie, but I'm going to be honest with what I see, right, wrong, or indifferent. And at the end of our next video, I will fully disclose my verdict on this film. We hope to see you next week when it's released, and until then, we hope to see you next week when we leave Earth to return to the Auriga. Until then, Earth will just have to do.
Earth? I'd rather stay here with the things, man.
If you like what you see here, click like and subscribe. Use Super Thanks. It helps.